with Ryan. Thank you for joining me this week. I got a fun little lesson here. I got my friend and former bandmate here, Mike Henning, from Minneapolis, Minnesota. He also runs an instructional website for banjo and mandolin. He's got some guitar up there as well. Very versatile musician. And he came down again from Minneapolis. And we're going to kind of do a co-lesson here. We're going to talk all about backup techniques. And we're going to talk about what we do in this configuration here and in different configurations, depending on who is in the band and who we're playing with. So we're going to focus, again, we're going to play a couple traditional bluegrass tunes and just break down our backup parts. So, you got anything to add?
Yeah, so with banjo, we always hear about banjo backup and how important it is, but what we need is someone to back up, and that's where Ryan comes in, because otherwise the backup can be just a little bit theoretical. So what we're going to have Ryan do is insert the vocal lines, insert the G runs, do some bass walks, and I'm going to show you a couple different ways how I would play backup to a basic bluegrass song. We'll start with maybe some basic rolls and chord walks, then get into adding some seventh chords, and then maybe even talk about some up the neck vamping as well.
Cool. Yeah, so what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to, play you a couple snippets, again, the demonstrations from these clips, and then we're going to break down, I think, the banjo part first. Mike's going to talk about just what he's doing and what his approach is, and then we're going to kind of flip-flop it, and then come back and do guitar and talk about what I'm doing, a lot of bass runs, different strumming patterns, and so forth. So we're going to start there. We're going to dive in. We're going to have a little fun, and anything else?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go.
So let's do the classic 9-pound hammer to start.
All right, cool.
So I'm going to start with some backup. I'm going to start with just some rolls and licks. And so you always hear in backup how you want to play around the vocal lines, right? Because we're playing backup. So my job is to support Ryan, make him sound better, and fill in those gaps. Remember, playing backup and playing music with anyone is kind of like a conversation. So he says something, I respond. If we're saying something at the same time, it's not going to work quite as well. So I want the first time that I play through the backup is kind of think about how I'm playing my licks around the vocal line. So for this first one, I'm going to work on some basic rolls. One, really focusing on the timing, so laying down a solid foundation for the groove. And then I'm going to work on adding some very basic licks around his vocal lines.
1, 2, 3, will a 9-pound hammer. It's a little too heavy for my size, for my size.
Now let's look at adding some basic seventh chords. So I'm going to lead the changes on this one. So I'm going to add a basic G7, a C7, and a D7. So I'm going to make each of the chords, G, C, and D, add a seventh version of it to kind of lead to the next chord and add a bluesy element to the song.
Cool, little color, if you will.
So let's try that.
All right. 1, 2, 3, with a 9-pound hammer. It's a little too heavy for my size. For my size. Well, little buddy, slow. How can I roll with you?
Now let's look at some basic chord walks. So I'm going to walk between the chords. So I'm going to think about my checkpoint. So I've got my G, I've got my C, and I've got my D. So those are the notes that I'm going to want to walk to and from, but I'm walking up to that note in each chord change. And that's going to really help, again, set the next chord change up. And that's especially important when we're working with just two of us, because we might not have a bass player. So I'm going to actually be playing a little bit of the bass part here. So let's try that.
Cool, and I'll stay out of your way.
All right, please do.
All right, 1, 2, 3. It's a long way to Harlem. It's a long way to Casper. Just get a little through. Just get a little through. Well, I'm hammer. It's a little too heavy for my size. For my size.
Now let's look at adding a little bit of rhythmic support. So I would do this especially when Ryan is taking a solo. So maybe not as much when he's singing, or maybe I would if there was harmonies, but we're going to look at some basic vamping now, which is a very rhythmic way to add backup. And I'm going to go up the neck a little bit on this one. So let's try that once.
1, 2, 3, there ain't no hammer that's in this tunnel that'll ring like mine, ring like mine. Roll down, buddy, when the roads are slow. How can I roll? We won't go.
Okay, now that we've got some basic vamping down, let's look at adding some up the neck rolls. This is another kind of cool thing you can do to do some more up the neck Scruggs style backup.
All right. 1, 2, 3, there ain't no hammer that's in this tunnel that'll ring like mine, ring like mine. Roll down, buddy, when the roads are slow. How can I roll? We
Okay, and lastly, let's look at adding it all together. So I'll start with some down the neck backup and then transition into up the neck backup and then work back down.
So do you want me to do a little bit longer?
Yeah,
then?
let's do 2 this time.
Okay. All right. 1, 2, 3 with a 9-pound hammer. It's a little too heavy for my side. For my side. Roll down, buddy, when the roads are slow. How can I roll? The wheels won't go. There ain't no hammer that's in this tunnel that'll ring like mine, ring like mine. Roll down, buddy, when the roads are slow. How can I roll when the wheels won't go? All right, so let's go ahead and break down that banjo stuff a little bit more. Mike, why don't you just, you don't have to give us a super note for note kind of thing, but more of just a briefing of your approach. I want maybe some positions, some rolls, and certainly some of those bass walks
Yep.
that you were doing to kind of fill it in. So,
So let's talk about a couple things here. Some of these will apply to banjo, and I think some will apply to just general guitar and music in general. So the first thing I think about, and I call it like the Ron Stewart pow, or it's a pinch basically. But basically, anytime we start the song, so when he says, well, the 9-pound, I'm going to do an initial pinch. It's really going to pop out and kind of, bam, just set that groove right away. And I think that's another thing you can do on guitar as well, is basically a big strum on the downbeat or a first pick that's really confident and definite. And basically what that's doing is, it's kind of like you're planting your flag in the ground. Is like, this is where I think the tempo is. And you might not always be right, but at least everyone knows this is where I think the tempo is. So I'll do that a lot in this song. So I might do it at the beginning. Again, let's do it one more time at the beginning.
okay. 1, 2, 3 with a 9-pound hammer.
Now do it right here again. So those are great ways to kind of, I call it the checkpoints in the song, where you really want to make sure that we're linking up on those points. And a lot of times it's right in between the middle of a verse. So it's that starts with the second line of the melody. That's a great spot to check back in on your timing to make sure everything is kind of working the way it should be.
Yeah, I mean, it's for those bluegrass standards. I'm waiting for that. I'm listening for that 9-pound hammer. I know the banjo most likely is going to lead the tune, or have a lot of say in the tune, and so I'm listening for that and trying to feed off of that as well.
Yep. In terms of backup, I'm using a lot of forward roll, so TIM to keep the drive going. Again, picking my spots to throw a lick. That's a great one. So after the G, D, right here, or whatever lick you know. There's lots of licks you can throw in there. I think, again, what I always tell people when they're starting to think about adding licks, think about the placement of the lick more than what lick you're actually doing. I think it's easy to get kind of overly concerned with what lick you're playing, and if you pick the right spot, even if you just do a little pinch, that can be sometimes be all it's needed is a little accent in the right spot. So I don't think you need to overthink the lick. Think about the timing and the placement of the lick. Otherwise, with other chord bass walks I'm doing, again, I'm kind of walking between the chords. So we have G for 2 measures. So I might do a basic roll and then hit the open 3rd string. And I'm just walking up the scale. That'd be like the easiest way to do it. Or you could do more of a kind of banjo-inspired rolling version where I might do a 2/4 slide on the 3rd string. And that's kind of just rolling. It's kind of implying those single string notes. You probably wouldn't do that on guitar, but you'd probably play the single notes. So it's good on banjo to know both versions, how to do a single note version and how to do kind of more of a rolling where you're implying that same walk. And remember, with your walks, they always work both directions, right? So if it works going up, it's going to work coming back down. So we could do, and then walk back down to G. And then for a D, I'm going from the open G string, 4th fret on the 4th string, 2nd fret, and then down to the open D. And remember, think of your checkpoints. So it's open 3rd string to open 4th string. So however I get down there, if you know that's where I need to get, then you can just think of how much time do I have to kill. So if you have more time, you could do, you can make the walk longer, or if you have less time, you can make it shorter. So if you think about your checkpoints, I think it's kind of like sliding into home plate. As long as I get to that low D note, I'm safe, right? So however I get there, so I think, again, same with your licks. If you think about those checkpoints and where do you have to get to, it's easy to get tripped up in what notes do I need to do to make the walk. Whereas if you think about the checkpoints, whatever notes you do, it'll work out as long as you get to the right checkpoint. So that's something I think about a lot.
Keeping it simple. I think, sometimes you get excited, right? We're trying to throw a bunch of stuff in there, but a lot of times just keeping it simple. Again, timing's everything. And like Mike said, just doing a little pinch, that might be all you need, and that fits perfectly.
Yeah, and I think the underlying point too is that a walk can be longer or can be shorter, and it can work, the same way. It just depends on how much time you have, and as you get better, you can, okay, I got a little more time. Let me add a little bit to that walk, or okay, I got a little less time, and remember, you got to think about where you're going, and don't worry too much about the notes in between, because if you get to that end note, it's going to work out. So I think that's a thing that, can trip up beginners is, I don't know every single note in between.
Don't worry about that.
Don't worry about that. Same with going up the neck at first with banjo and guitar. If you're waiting for this perfect transition to get you up the neck, you might be waiting a little while. So again, just find a way to get up there at first and explore around a little bit, and you can smooth it out as time goes on. Same with your walks.
Yeah, I always tell my students, it's not, the notes are a close second. It's the timing is the most important thing. Like, notes are important, but we want to get to the timing. And again, if you play one wrong note, who cares as long as you land where you're supposed to. So, Mike, I really like the backup you did when you went up the neck and you kind of were doing some of the chuck stuff. And it really added a nice dynamic. It kind of brought everything down. I could hear the vocal and everything. You can talk about that?
Yeah, so that's a basic vamping technique. I'm using my F-shaped G chord, the standard one, at the 5th fret. And I'm doing like a thumb pinch. And then that's a basic pattern. Or you can do thumb, index, pinch. Very kind of similar to like Merle Travis style guitar where you're using your thumb a lot.
Cool.
And I'm basically switching between different shapes and doing one vamp on each shape. The other thing I'm doing there is muting the strings a little bit with my left hand. It'll look like I'm squeezing, but actually what I'm doing is I'm letting off the pressure, because you don't want, where Ryan was saying he liked that rhythmic sound, how I'm getting that is I'm actually letting off the pressure. And that especially is important on a faster song if I'm going. Whereas if I let that, it gets too muddy because there's too many overtones ringing out. The other thing I was doing a lot was that thumb wrap. That's a classic Scruggs lick where you wrap your thumb around either 2 frets away or 1 fret away to get the 6th or the 7th. So you can do that on your C, your G way up here, or your D chord. I think I was doing it on all of them, and that's something I would use all the time on bluegrass if I want kind of a Scruggs style sound.
Yeah, I really like the backup where you did the. Well, I mean, I like them all, but the when you did the chuck, and get the rhythmic thing, it just created so much space, right? Because the banjo is always rolling, or a lot of times rolling, right? So to do that, I was like, whoa, something happened.
And I think especially in a smaller ensemble, that vamping can work really well because, again, it provides more rhythmic support. If we had a bass and a mandolin doing the boom chuck rhythm, I might be able to get away with some roller, just kind of generic roll. But when there's just two of us, especially if Ryan went to take a solo, okay, that rhythmic support is going to completely drop out. And that's where I need to jump in playing backup to support what he's doing. And also, again, like he said, it highlights the vocals if I do more of that rhythm. The other thing I'll do sometimes is basically like a half vamp, half roll. So I might go. The other thing I talk about all the time in my videos is using that Scruggs lick. Basically like the equivalent of the G run on the guitar, but you can basically do that from wherever you are on the neck. So if I'm up in my C7 with that thumb wrap that we were just talking about, I can go. That's a great lick anywhere you are on the neck. Even if I'm way up here. To get back down from wherever you are, and that's also great practice of, I call it like snapping back down to home base, to getting back down to your first position rolls. So that's another thing I'll do basically all the time. I really like that half vamping, half rolling. So I'm doing vamping on the G, and then a little roll, and then vamping, roll, and then roll, vamp. Totally subjective and up to the individual player, and that's what can make backup so tough, is that there's no right answer. There's just kind of better decisions and worse decisions. And again, I'm always thinking, what is going to back Ryan up? What's going to make his vocal sound better? Backup is about supporting people, not showing off. So that's kind of what I think about when I'm playing backup.
That last stuff was really tasteful. I like the way you did the roll and the chuck in there at the same time. That really provided, I don't know, it's a lot of color and energy. So
and the other thing I'm thinking about too is I'm always thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So I'm always thinking of what's the underlying timing, because I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I'm playing banjo, I can't be thinking thumb, index, middle. Oh, did I do index or did I do middle? It's like there's too much stuff going on at that point. So I'm thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Again, like my checkpoints. If I can stay with that good timing, whatever I play, I can hopefully make it work out. I found the biggest thing that's going to distract the listener's attention is getting out of time. Sure. So the notes and the licks, yeah, you want them to be good and you can make them better. But the underlying thing is I want that solid foundation of solid timing that again, supports everything that I'm doing. And then I can hopefully make whatever I do work out, whether I played the wrong roll or a different roll that I was hoping to do. Yeah. If I keep that underlying timing, I can make it all work out, hopefully. And that's what I'm always thinking about is 1, 2, 3, 4. Where's the underlying beat that I can tap into? And that's about me and Ryan working together, right? It's not about one of us being right or wrong. Right. It's about us sticking together. So I also have to listen to what Ryan's doing, and he has to listen to what I'm doing, which is a tricky thing for beginners. And I always tell people that you have to practice that, of getting outside of yourself and actually listening to the other person while you're playing, which can be tough.
Well, and yeah, I mean, you got to practice playing with somebody, because then you notice, oh, Mike always does this lick here. Yep. Mike goes up the neck on the third verse every time. Like, then, you might not know that the first couple times you're playing together, but after a while, Mike and I played a bunch of gigs together. You really get a good feel like Mike's going to do this at this point. And then that just makes, we just gel.
And then eventually you can find something that complements it too. And, okay, I know he's going to go up the neck, so I'll stay down here.
Sure.
And that kind of complements.
Absolutely.
I also think of another thing I think about with backup is the sonic space that you're taking up, right? So if you're rocking that low G chord, because there's just two of us, that gives me a lot of freedom, right? To maybe go up the neck and get out of the way of his vocal and his guitar, and vice versa. Like if I saw him going up the neck to start a second solo maybe, then that's where I want to respond and go down the neck and do something that complements him. So I think of that kind of compare and contrast thing where if you're going up here, then I'll take the other spot down here.
Sure.
You know, so I think that's something I always think about. Even if you don't know what to play exactly, start thinking about, okay, should I go up higher or should I go up lower? Again, you can always figure out, you know, what to do. But I think just conceptually thinking about, okay, should I be up the neck right now or should I be down the neck? And that can be really valuable of just creating a backup part, you know, before you've put all the rolls and licks together, which will take time.
Yeah, and you just gotta try it, right? You gotta see what works and what doesn't work. Trial and error.
That's why me and I know Ryan provides all the practice tracks as well. It's a very low stress way to practice your licks and your backup. So you can't encourage you enough to take advantage of the practice tracks. That's probably one of the single best things you can do to improve your playing.
I agree completely.
You know, try playing backup. Try playing a lead. Try going from lead to backup. You know, there's so many things you can do.
That's how I learned to play bluegrass, is playing along with backing tracks, doing just as Mike explained. That I learned the arrangement and I play along with the tracks. Because I didn't have anybody else in the room,
exactly.
right?
And you don't always.
So I can't stress it enough either. I tell my students.
Or even if you're listening in your car. I mean, I always tell banjo students this. You know, maybe you're playing a bluegrass song in your car. Start thinking, oh, is the banjo up high? Is the banjo down low? Is the banjo rolling? Is the banjo vamping? Even if you can't do it yet, you can start conceptualizing, okay, that's where this vamping pattern fits. Okay, I hear that. Oh, I hear he's up the neck. And there's so much value and stuff you can pick up through kind of osmosis of just listening. And eventually when you get the rolls and licks together, then it all comes together because it's like, oh, that's what they were doing up the neck. But I think just starting to, and that's really good ear training as well, just to pick out the banjo part in a song or pick out the guitar part and try and see if you can, you know, hone in on what that person's doing. That can be really good practice.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I've had other musicians tell me, I practice a lot in the car. And I'd be like, what do you mean you practice a lot? I mean, how you can't practice? He's like, well, I'm listening. And I'm thinking about what I'm doing, you know, like, and I was like, oh, and that really changed me. You can practice while you just listen. It is possible and encouraged. And so that's a good point.
I mean, what I always tell people, if you're listening, see if you can lock into the count. So if you can pick up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, you know, okay, that's where I can do my strum. That's where I can do my roll. But if you can't hear the beat, you're shooting at a target where you don't know what it is, right? So if you can hear that beat, maybe you can't play it yet, but you have that confidence of, I know what target I'm shooting at, and that's really valuable. So that's another thing you can do is just see if you can count along or snap your fingers.
Cool. So a lot of great stuff there about the banjo. Mike, should we flip the camera here and take a look at the guitar and kind of break it down?
Yep, let's do it.
All right, let's do the guitar stuff.